Hey everyone, what is up? I am so glad that you are here. Happy New Year. I hope you are really excited for what this year is to bring, or the plans that you may have had that you want to execute this year. Hopefully you are ready to go in and succeed and take over and walk into everything you thought you've ever dreamed of. If you haven't seen last week's video, I talked about how to survive inflation and how I explained about trusting the government. Now in that video, I talked about two different governments. I talked about the government I am born into and the government I am made for. Now in this video, I'm going to elaborate a little bit more, but somewhat in another way. I just want to make sure that whatever information I give you, it is the best that I can explain it in the best way possible so you can have a better understanding. Now before I get into that, I need you to do something really quick if you have not yet. I would love for you to be a part of this family and know more about how you can make wise choices every single day. And if you are in agreement that you want to make a change, your New Year's resolution that you want to become a better person and you want to start making even wiser choices, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below, because I don't want you to miss out on these other videos that I'm going to put out. So without further ado, let's get into this video. So trusting the government. Now I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on the government that I'm made for. So as you know, as I have taught and have put out there, that I am walking into submitting and have submitted underneath the government that I made for. So when it comes to this government and the principles is made and came from a specific kingdom, and this kingdom is ran by a specific person, and the principles and the laws of this person is brought out because this is the heart of what they want in order to expand their influence on different places or territories. So how I'm going to explain that, the best way I can give it to you as far as government and a kingdom and what it is, I'm going to use the one and only best movie that is a classic that pretty much explains about a king and a kingdom, and that is none other than The Lion King. Woo! Now, we all know the movie The Lion King, and who is your favorite character in the entire movie? I know you all love some Mufasa. Now, Mufasa, he is what? He is a king. In order for a king to be a king, he has to have a territory. And what is the territory of Mufasa? The Pride Lands. Now, there's something that's also important when a king in a kingdom is, in order for the kingdom to thrive and to be abundant and flourish, he has to have laws and principles that he abide by. Now, the laws and principles that he puts in place is basically him setting up the stage of how he wants his kingdom to run, how he wants his kingdom to thrive. And anyone who submits underneath the king, it is their job to make sure that they follow the principles and laws that the king has set before. Now, normally the laws and principles that the king set before are not harsh. They're great, and they're keeping, and it's there to keep the citizens in alignment. And as you can know, with Mufasa in his heart and how much he loved people and the laws and principles that he had there, it caused the people, the animals or the citizens in his kingdom to love him so much. Now, you know, in order for a king to have a prosperous and abundant land, he has to make sure he walks out the covenant that he has with those who are within his kingdom, such as the laws, the principles, making sure that they meet their basic needs, such as food and water. Also, another thing that the king does is he protects anything and everything within his territory. Now, if you choose not to submit to the king, guess what? There's a place for you, and that is outside the Pride Lands. And we know who decided not to submit underneath the king's authority. And we all know that is what? The hyenas. But the very important thing is with Mufasa, and by him being king, his job is to make sure he protects his people and protects his land. And he protects it so well, that's why everyone loves Mufasa. And when you love someone, when you adore someone, when you know that the person who got your back is going to take care of you, that you don't even have to ask, what do you end up doing? You end up worshiping them. You end up praising them. Matter of fact, their presence alone will cause you to humble even more, because you are in adoration and underneath the glory of the king, because he's so wonderful, because not only is he protecting, but he is walking out the promises and the covenant that he has with his citizens. Now let's get to the other side of the story, and we all know about Scar. Scar is Mufasa's brother. Now, even though Scar has this bitterness, manipulative, depressive attitude, one thing that Mufasa still did, and he loved his brother. Now, even though Scar didn't submit to him, we can clearly see Scar still had to find some way to respect his brother. Now, we all know that Scar really desperately wanted to be king of the Pride Lands. Matter of fact, he thinks he was the rightful king anyway in the first place, and it never should have been Mufasa. And because Simba, we know, is born, he definitely know he won't be able to be king or next in line. So what is someone who do that? They're desperate and they want something super bad, and they do anything and everything no matter what, even if it end up hurting someone. And that is, he will kill, he will steal, he will manipulate, he will destroy, he will do anything he can, because they want to make sure that whatever desire they have, it gets executed. Now, there is something else that Scar had to do in order to make sure that the plan of him being king in whatever way he possibly can to make it happen, he had to do something that's super important, as I said, what Mufasa does in order for him to be king. That is, he had to have a plan. And he also had to have followers. And who did he turn to? The hyenas. Now, there's something that's very important that Scar knew that he had to do in order to gain the majority vote in order to become king. And that is something that he had to make a covenant and a promise in order for them to follow him so he could become king. And what was that? To make sure they have food. Now, we all know that, once again, when you're outside of the territory of the king, which means the king can't protect you, you have to fend for yourself. You have to find your own food, your own water, your own place to live. If somebody attacks you, you got to fend for yourself, because the king can't protect you, because you're outside of his kingdom. You're outside of his principles. You're outside of his government, because the fact that you chose not to submit underneath him and his laws and what he wanted for the kingdom in order for it to be thriving and for you as that citizen to be protected. So when Scar made a promise to the hyenas that, yo, if you follow me, you will never go hungry again. And you know what that sound like? Great news to the hyenas, because what did they do? They end up following Scar, because they were tired of where they were. They're tired of the way they were living, because the fact that, once again, when you make a choice not to submit, you have to fight for yourself. You have to make things happen your own way. And so when Scar said that he would do these things, they were on board, and now the plan can be executed, and now he can be in position of doing what he wants to do in order for him to be king. Now, as we can see with Scar and his kingdom and how it was, in order for him to be really honest, he really wasn't truly the king anyway. But the only way he became king was by majority vote. Now, I know it wasn't majority, but really they voted him in. But the more hyenas there was, the more that wanted to follow him, that is the majority vote. Because technically, when Mufasa ended up dying by being murdered by his own brother Scar, there was the lionesses. And so, as you can see, there were more hyenas than the lionesses. And where was the majority who was following? Scar. So that's what made him king anyway. But at the end of the day, even though Scar became king, Scar didn't even know what the heck he were doing. And matter of fact, the thing that he promises the hyenas, matter of fact, the hyenas was worse off than they were when Mufasa was alive. So that's crazy, right? At first, when Mufasa was alive, they had no food, no water, they were starving, they couldn't really do anything. And now a king promises, yo, I'm gonna give you food, an abundance life, right? Then the king becomes king, and they still ain't got no food or no water or nothing. Because why? He doesn't know what he's doing, number one. And number two, he didn't really care about the hyenas anyway. All he cared about was himself. All he cared about was having the title king. And now he became king. He's not even executing the promises as a king should. in keeping the covenant that he had with the hyenas, and now the land is completely dry. There ain't no water. The animals who are underneath Mufasa, they end up moving on. Even the lioness said, yo, who was it, Sarabi? She was like, we need to move on because this land is horrible, and at a respectful way, because once again, you know, he ended up being king, so there's a certain way you got to approach the king, because you can't come to the king any kind of way, because he can exile you or off with your head or get killed or whatnot. And you know, the hyenas was already hungry, so I'm pretty sure that he would have fed the lions who disrespected him to the hyenas, because they are, like I said, they are already hungry. But as you can see, the two different kingdoms between Mufasa and Scar. Now, I know you may be asking yourself, okay, T, I understand you're talking about a king and a kingdom, and you're saying you're trusting a government that you're made for. What does that have to do with anything? Well, I'm being very transparent. Because I am submitted underneath a kingdom, and because it's thriving just the way that we all love Mufasa, right? The same principles and things that he's doing that caused his territory and land to be prosperous, and for him to be glorified and worshipped and praise, because he has a heart and he cares about his citizens and wants to take care of them. That's pretty much the type of government and kingdom that I submitted myself to myself. Now, the specific kingdom, I'm actually going to talk about that in the next video. Now, I know it may not make sense right now. I get it, because of two things. Number one, we are Americans who really wasn't underneath a kingdom type ruler government. Why? Because we wanted to be thriving and blooming on our own. We wanted to have our own laws. We wanted to vote people into positions. And so we don't really understand what that really is. Now, if you didn't really quite know that, think about Independence Day. The whole purpose of Independence Day was to celebrate being independent. We didn't want to be ruled by the British. That's the reason why we are independent. That's why people want to come to the land of the free, home of the brave, and you want to make your own life and do your own thing. But there's something that we also have to keep in mind that we keep forgetting. As much as we're going to do things for our own selves, there's a lot of things that we're coming in contact with people who already have their mind made up of their own lives and what they want and what they want to do. And we all can see how that result is sometimes. Sometimes people manipulate, sometimes people steal, sometimes people kill. Why? Because there's no respect for one another, because it's pretty much every man's for themselves. But because of the government that I'm underneath, I am learning and being trained of what it is to treat people. I am being trained what it is to live a life of respecting one another and not wanting the things of other people. But I'm going to get a little bit more into that in some other videos. But I'm just giving, once again, another thorough example that's going to set you up for the next video that's going to go deeper of why it's important. So that's number one of why it's kind of really hard to comprehend, because number one, we weren't really underneath that. The second reason why is it's really good to know anyway, because as much as you may not think it's important, it kind of is important for you to know about a kingdom. It's kind of really important what it is to know what it's like about a king, because these are some important keys that, like I said, I'm going to explain in the next video that you don't want to miss. And this is going to go into full detail, probably a little bit of some boundaries, because I want to make sure that it makes sense, and I also want to make sure that you understand, so that way you can make a decision of how you want to now live your life moving forward. Now, if you like this video, I would love for you to hit that like button. Also, share some things about the movie that also stood out to you, because The Lion King is bomb. Matter of fact, why don't you put in the comments some things that you loved about Mufasa, him being king? Because I don't know about you, I love Mufasa because he walked out what he said he was going to do, and he really cared about everyone. But the one thing that he really cared about, even though he didn't really have, you know, a lot of love for him because he was so bitter, is he really loved his brother Scar. He could have easily banned him from the Pride Lands if he wanted to, but because that was his brother, because that was his fam, he still showed grace. He still showed mercy to his brother Scar, even though Scar did not really like him because he was in the position that he always wanted. Matter of fact, Scar couldn't even celebrate the fact that Mufasa was king. Now think of some things in your life where you wanted something so bad, but you couldn't even celebrate someone else that they had it because you wanted it so bad. I can raise my hand because I've had that plenty of times. Seeing people being in places and positions I always wanted, I'm telling you, my attitude was completely horrible. But because I got to a place of submitting myself underneath some principles and laws, I got to a place of reminding myself, okay, even though this person is doing this, that doesn't mean they're any better. That doesn't mean they're any greater. And that also doesn't mean there's not greatness in a life and a plan for me. There is one too for me. But our journeys are different. And because our journeys are different, I have to learn to respect that person's journey as much as I am grateful and living in my own journey to where the destination that I want to get to as well. So, like I said, there's so much rich things in this movie that's awesome and amazing. And I would love for you to share it in the comments. And also, if you haven't yet, and if you just went ahead and skipped to this video, please make sure you check out the other video of how to survive inflation, because a lot of those things that I mentioned in that video was a setup for this one, and hopefully it can get you some interest about, wow, what can I do or who can I submit underneath that's going to take care of my basic needs, because I know that no matter what, as far as crisis, as far as inflation or pandemics, everyone for some reason, anytime something crazy like that hits, that's the first thing that ends up attacking everyone, and that is basic needs. So, thank you so much for watching. I will definitely see you in the next one. And don't forget, don't just make good choices, y'all, but wise ones. Bye.